we told you that we were actually in court in Colorado with regard to a ballot initiative fight there, and that's, again, to keep Donald Trump off using the 14th Amendment, Section 3, which is the disqualification clause for officers who take an oath. So that case has now been set for trial. We've got a trial date of October 30th through November 3rd. It could get extended. It could get moved back. We've got motions to dismiss going in on Friday, and then another series of motions going in next week. So all of that is happening right now. At the same time, today we are filing at the U.S. District Court, and if we have it, let's put it up on a screen. This is the Oklahoma Republican Party's motion to intervene pursuant to Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 24, which is the civil procedure rule you utilize to engage the case. It is exactly the same thing there. We're representing the Oklahoma Republican Committee. Very similar case to the Colorado case, basically the same legal arguments. Differential is in Oklahoma, it's actually in federal court. In Colorado, it's in the state court system. So what the left's doing here, Logan, is looking at 13 states nationwide. That's how many there are right now. And they're really doing everything they can to keep Trump off the ballot. But it goes beyond that. It goes out to the folks having a choice of who they want on the ballot. And the groups that are fighting this, groups that are really motivated to keep not only Donald Trump off the ballot, but to create the legal look. All of this is costing money. All of this is costing time, and it becomes a distraction to some of the candidates. So that's what's going on right now on that.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful also to explain. You can do that in the next segment, this segment, exactly how this works in terms of when you see a headline that we have right now: breaking ACLJ and Oklahoma GOP join forces. What does that mean? Why does the Oklahoma GOP get involved? Like, why? What is the good, the bad, and the ugly of sort of what all happens here?
Well, the GOP of the state, and here it's Oklahoma and Colorado, obviously it's Colorado, they have to get involved because they're the ones who put up the candidates. So when a candidate qualifies under the party's rules, remember it's the local party that controls the candidacy on getting on a ballot, they're right to have the candidates that they have certified as the valid candidates, and there could be 10 of them. They have they certify that to the state, and the state then has to put it up. Now, what they're saying here is no, you cannot put up Trump because of the 14th Amendment disqualification clause. That's clause 3, because as an officer of the United States, he violated his oath. Well, first of all, a president, I'm going to get into this in the next segment, is not an officer. And by the way, we got early on that the very first day this came out because we know a lot about that because we represented the president. Right. So we know what roles the president is playing. The president is not an officer of the United States. He's the chief. He's the commanding officer of the United States. He's not an executive officer in that sense. He's not a department head. So the law doesn't even apply. Their insurrection statute doesn't even apply to a president or, for that matter, a vice president.
Yeah.
Stephen Calabresi, noted constitutional conservative scholar, someone I have a lot of respect for, was promoting an article by Mike Paulson, who I also have a lot of respect for. And the truth is, Calabresi yesterday said, I got it wrong. He said that he spoke to Attorney General McCasey, and McCasey agreed with the position we were advocating and said, nope, the president is not subject to that. So they don't even have the underlying statute to support this. But nevertheless, we're now in 2 federal court cases, 1 federal, 1 state, one going to trial in the end of October, the other one, no trial date yet. But there are 13 of them that we're looking at. Hey, welcome back. We're announcing today that we are filing in the United States District Court for the Western District of Oklahoma a case that involves the Oklahoma Republican Party's motion to intervene. And this is what's fascinating to me. This one's in federal court. The one in Colorado is in state court. Joining us right now via, is it Skype, I guess? Yeah, via Skype, is the chairman of the Oklahoma GOP and also an Oklahoma state senator, Nathan Dahm. Nathan, when you first got word of this, what was your initial reaction on this?
Well, obviously, we've seen that the left and Democrats are doing everything they can to use lawfare to try to keep President Trump off the ballot, to try to squelch people's First Amendment rights and free speech. And so it didn't surprise me at all. But I immediately started contacting people, and then had somebody from ACLJ reach out and say that they were interested in it as well. And so we immediately started working on what we could do to protect people's right to vote in Oklahoma for the candidate that they desire to vote for.
So let me ask this also. Obviously, this is part of a trend we're seeing now. We've got the case in Colorado. We already have a trial date there, by the way, Nathan. It's going to be tried on October 30th, starting October 30th. Your case, it's in federal court, so it's going to move differently because it is a federal court action than Colorado's a state court action. These are all destined for the Supreme Court of the United States. What's been the reaction of the Oklahoma GOP to this move?
We've received a lot of support from the Republicans across the state in Oklahoma. They're tired of these leftist activist judges across the country that no one elected, that believe that just because they're enshrined in a black robe, that they all of a sudden get to dictate how the rest of us live our lives, contrary to the Constitution, contrary to the beliefs of the majority of the people of Oklahoma. Just because they are a judge, they think they can go contrary to the morality and the principles of the people of Oklahoma. So everyone was very excited to hear that we were getting actively involved in this. Obviously, we didn't share a whole lot of the details of the specifics as we were working with the team at ACLJ to get it finalized, but we're excited to be able to officially announce that the lawsuit is being filed and that we are fighting to defend their rights.
Well, and listen, we appreciate that you are working with us, and we look forward to working with you. But you had said something here very important, Nathan, I want to really emphasize. You serve as an Oklahoma State Senator. How do you react in your capacity as senator to the idea that these left-wing groups would come in and say, okay, GOP of Oklahoma, you don't get to decide who your candidate is?
Well, unfortunately, too many on the right, too many Republicans for far too long have said, that's not the hill to die on. And because we haven't fought these battles, because we haven't engaged in the quote unquote culture war, because we've wanted to be nice and not be perceived as whatever name the leftists are going to call us, whatever they're going to try and brand us with, we've ceded hill after hill after hill. The left has taken over almost every area of society. I guess the one benefit to that is people are finally waking up to that aspect and understanding how much we have lost, how much ground we've lost, how much the left has taken over. So I've been fighting these types of things for a long time, knowing how far the left is going to go with this. I lived overseas as a missionary and as a missionary child. My parents, I grew up in a formerly communist country in Eastern Europe. I know where the Marxists are trying to take us. That's why I'm willing to do everything I can to defend the Constitution and fight for the rights of the people.
You, as a kid of a missionary that grew up in a country that has experienced totalitarian regimes, this case must be very personal to you.
Absolutely. This is the type of stuff that we've seen in these communist regimes it's straight out of the Marxist playbook to where they will use every political means possible to refuse to allow their opponents to have a voice, to allow people to have a vote. I believe it was Joseph Stalin that said something to the effect of, it doesn't matter who you vote for, it matters who counts the votes. And in a lot of these communist countries, they'll say that you have the right to vote, but there's only ever one candidate on the ballot, and that's the Communist Party's nominee, and that's what we're seeing with the left.
Is your Secretary of State there in Oklahoma a Republican?
Yes, but actually, it's not our Secretary of State that deals with the election stuff. We actually have
your
a
election
Secretary
of the elections,
and that person is appointed and serves at the pleasure. They also serve as the Secretary of the Senate, so it's supposed to be a nonpartisan issue. But the gentleman that is there is a Republican.
Okay. Because what's interesting here for people to understand is this lawsuit has been brought by a guy who says he's a Republican running for president. He's a Texas resident. He's filed another lawsuit like the Colorado suit. He argues that the former president is ineligible to be president due to the 14th Amendment, the disqualification clause that we've been talking about. He claims to be a Republican candidate for office, and I guess he's filed with the various state, and he's seeking to eliminate, quote, his rival from the chance to run for office. The lawsuit was brought against two parties, President Trump and the Secretary of the Oklahoma State Election Board. So that's how they do it versus Colorado, where it's the Secretary of State. Here it's the State Election Board. Have there been any comments out of the Secretary of the Election Board yet?
None that I've seen. Obviously, they're probably going to wait to see what happens in the courts as this goes throughout the process. But if I could just say something on the ridiculous claim on the 14th Amendment, I mean, a plain reading of the 14th Amendment, first of all, shows that the presidency the president is not even mentioned in that. It mentions presidential electors and other positions, but it doesn't mention the president. And on top of all that, when they keep claiming insurrection, there is actually a federal statute on insurrection that no one has been charged with from January 6th, let alone President Trump hasn't been charged with it. Yes, in the court of public opinion, with the media that now has control of that, they will convict someone of all kinds of crimes. They've done it time and time again. Nancy Pelosi talked about it. It's the whole smear package that they'll smear it, they'll present it out there, the media will run with it, and then in everybody's minds that are gullible enough to believe the media, they believe that that is the case.
Okay, what's interesting to me, Nathan, in this particular situation is you're right. The president's not an officer under that provision. So under the article, the 14th Amendment, Section 3, the disqualification clause, he is not an officer. I said that the first day this case was discussed, and then Stephen Calabrese, who I respect a lot, very well-respected conservative lawyer, well-known, initially said yes, he is, and then it's now changed his mind. Others are going to start changing their mind, too. And you're right, the implementing statute here, not the amendment, the statute, is the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act is one of the only things they have not charged the former president with, as you said, no one else as well. Hey, we look forward to working with you, Nathan. Thanks for being on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for all you do. Glad to be a part of it. Thank you for helping.
Thanks. So there you have it, Logan. That's case number 2 in week 2.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to keep it going, and we need your support. Go to aclj.org right now. To make your donation and support, because obviously this takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of incredible members of our team to put together for these kind of cases.
Well, look, I mean, the teamwork that's involved in this, we had a meeting on this right after our radio meeting. There are 14 of these filed right now. So we're trying to figure out there's some that are going to be dismissed pretty handily, I think. There's others that are going to have to be litigated. So when they're in court, we're going to have to litigate them. So we're putting the teams together. I understand it's stretching our resources, as you can imagine. So that's why we fight like we do. Do you want to try to take this call before the break, or you want to wait?
If you want to, we can. Let's go to Jason, Oklahoma, on line 1. You're on the air.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Love the show. I as the Marine Corps enlisted, we were taught that the president is an officer. He's a commanding officer, commander-in-chief. I would just say, because there's going to be a lot of doubt on that statement, I wouldn't even focus on that statement. I mean,
let me explain something to you, Jason. I appreciate your service. He is not the commanding officer. He's the commander-in-chief. He is not an officer of the United States Army. He is constitutionally the commander-in-chief. He is specifically not an executive officer. The executive officers work for him as president. So he is not subject to, the same thing would be true with the vice president, is not subject to this. And now the conservative scholars are coming around to realizing that. And obviously we're going to have to prove that in court, and I appreciate your service, but I think this is where part of the fallacy of this litigation really is. So as we're announcing, Oklahoma is the latest case we are filing a motion to intervene in. That one is in federal court. Our motion to intervene in Colorado, which is in state court, was granted yesterday. I want to go to Harry Hutchinson first on this. Harry, we've got 2 of these. There's probably 13 or 14 we're looking at. There may be 50. What are you seeing so far?
Well, we're seeing a legal tsunami, which is aimed at twisting the language of the Constitution for political purposes. So what we are witnessing is an act of pure political desperation, because the left and some elite law professors, even on the right, they fear the prospect of President Trump being the nominee, and secondarily being elected by the American people. So they don't want to leave anything to chance. So they want to intervene now, and they want to use the Constitution as a political weapon. And I think it's very, very important for our listeners and for us as an organization to fight back.
All right, so which we're doing. One's in state court, one's in federal court. But you agree, Harry, this is ultimately going to the Supreme Court of the United States.
I think that's precisely correct.
All right. So, Andy, we're looking at the strategy here. We saw Stephen Calabresi, a noted conservative scholar, change his position. He initially said Trump was subject to the 14th Amendment, Section 3's disqualification clause. Last night he said, nope, as he studied it, he's not an officer. He spoke to his friend and friend of ours, Mike Mukasey, former Attorney General under George W. Bush, and changed his view.
Yes, Judge Mukasey, who was a U.S. District Judge before he became Attorney General, a very conservative, brilliant lawyer, known to us, has opined that the President of the United States is not an officer of the United States and therefore is not subject to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And apparently Calabresi recast his position based upon Judge Mukasey's view that he is not subject to that clause and the disqualification that provides. Well, I think that's very admirable that Professor Calabresi has changed his opinion based upon Judge Mukasey's very erudite opinion. And I think this is important. I think most law professors, however, are going to stick with a position that has been advocated by Ballot and Paulson. I hope they don't. I hope they see the reality of their ways. There's a separate oath in the Constitution that the president takes. The president is unique in the American system.
He's the only person that is a branch of government.
Right. The unitary executive, we talked about this during the days that we represented President Trump. A unitary executive, he is the executive branch of government. He is not an officer of the United States. So therefore, he is not subject to the disqualification. In addition to which, even if he was an officer, which he is not under the Constitution, he didn't engage in an insurrection. The idea that he engaged in what a dictionary definition in 1828 called an insurrection is contrary to anything. That's a matter of law. It's a matter of conviction. It's a matter of having a jury trial, and President Trump didn't do that. But these, as Harry Hutchison said, are desperate attempts by a political elite to keep him out of office again. They can't stand the idea of Donald Trump being president again.
But it goes beyond that, because even if you're against Trump or for Trump, the idea that an individual could come in and say that the 14th Amendment that disqualifies someone from public office can be implemented self-executing. In other words, there's not an underlying statute where there's been a conviction.
Right.
And he hasn't even been charged with it, so there hasn't been. Logan should send shockwaves through everybody. My question is, do the American people, and I think our members do, understand how significant of a threat to liberty this is?
I don't know if the people on the other side care. I mean, I think that's just the truth. It's whatever can be done to stop President Trump. It doesn't matter if laws are broken, if things are changed, or if it could really backfire on them on future elections. It doesn't matter because there's one goal, and that goal is to stop Trump regardless of how it impacts the constitutional freedoms of Americans. So I think that's the main thing, is that you have people on the other side of the aisle, if you will, who are not thinking logically about this. They don't care. It's all specifically focused on one person, one man, not about the standard that it could set. The same happened with impeachment.
Yeah, and you're right. And the question, though, is going to become, I think, as this thing expands, and it already is. You've got 14 states. It goes to 50 states. Somewhere along the way, I'm going to be an optimist. Somewhere along the way, though, some state election official or Secretary of State is going to say, yeah, I'm going to disqualify. In fact, the Secretary of State of Colorado, who's a defendant, opposed our intervention. If she really was a defendant and did not want to be compelled to do this, she would have welcomed the intervention. By the way, the court overruled that and said we have the right to intervene. But somewhere along the way, we're going to run into one, Harry.
I think that is correct. And I think one of the things that we should keep in mind is that this is a concerted effort, and they are attempting to bring cases in virtually each and every jurisdiction in the United States in the hope that at least one Secretary of State or one federal judge or one state court will intervene to block President Trump, and then that particular case may then move forward to a higher level, ultimately to be decided by the United States Supreme Court. And so I think we should keep in mind that there is not a legal case to be made here. It is a political case which they are then twisting into a legal case in order to preclude President Trump from running for office again.
I mean, it's so outrageous. This is what dictators do, is they say you're not qualified to run for office, so they throw people off the ballot. We've called this out in the last 10 or 15 years when we've seen it in other countries. I'm thinking Pakistan. There are times when the courts or the political system or the dictator decides to kick their opponent off the ballot to say you didn't qualify, or because of your past, you're not qualified to run. These are the moments where the State Department usually stands up and calls it out. But I can guarantee you, Anthony Blinken is not going to call out Joe Biden. Anthony Blinken has already demonstrated that he knows how to manipulate an election for Joe Biden.
I actually think, Rick, that this is the most significant constitutional attack on the right to vote that we have seen in U.S. history, where, government bureaucrats, or a judge for that matter, thinks that they can keep a qualified nominee off a ballot under the 14th Amendment, Section 3's disqualification clause, which is for insurrection of officers, of which the president is not one, nor is the vice president for that matter. And by the way, Steve Calabresi, after we started talking about this, changed his view on this. But the fact is, when you look at what has happened here, the idea that administrators are, the Secretary of State, for instance, in Colorado, Rick, fought our intervention, even though she's a defendant. You'd think she'd want additional ammo coming in, so to speak. Oh, no, she didn't want it. The judge let us do it, but that tells you where she was going.
It's political manipulation through and through. It's so obvious, and thank God we have ACLJ to fight it. Our team is fantastic. The lawyers are on this. And we've got to stand up. If you're listening to this broadcast, you have a voice. You have to speak out. If you have the ability to send money, you have to send us some money to be able to fight these in court. These are expensive endeavors, but you cannot just sit back and just watch. Pray, share on social media, give where you can. There's a whole bunch of things that you can be doing, but you've got to use your voice.
Thanks so much for being with us.
All right, let's go ahead and take a phone call. Let's go to Joe in New York on line 3. Joe, welcome. You're on the air.
Thank you for taking my question. Sure. God bless you all and your families and the ACLJ for everything you do.
Thank you.
Could the Biden administration be held responsible for violating the 14th Amendment with the current Iran deal of $6 billion being released to Iran with the prisoner swap?
No, because we don't believe that the president is an officer subject to the 14th Amendment disqualification clause, and that would be preventing him from running for re-election. No, we don't. I don't, because it's good for the if our position is it doesn't apply to president, it doesn't apply to any president. And that's the way it should be constitutionally, Andy.
Yes, that's correct. The way that you rectify what you see happening in Iran, money for these prisoners, is the election.
Yes.
It's the electoral process.
But
get him out of office.
Candidates are on the ballot.
Yes, and you make sure that the candidate that is on the ballot is one that you want to vote for, and not some Secretary of State making the decision for you as to who you can vote for.
But the constitutional significance of this, using the disqualification clause, which was last used in 1918 during World War I, to use that now in this kind of context seems to me, Harry, to be a constitutional stretch, but it raises very serious constitutional issues.
Absolutely. So the left and many elite law professors have launched an effort they claim to save democracy. How do you save democracy, according to the left? First, you must destroy it. And so one of the things that they're doing is they're trying to prevent President Trump from actually appearing on the ballot, meaning that voters would be deprived of the right to vote potentially for the candidate of their choice. And nothing could be more of an attack on democracy than this particular left-wing tactic. And so I think all Americans should be up in arms, not necessarily because they favor Donald Trump, but because this particular effort is designed to shrink democracy. It is designed to create a faux democracy or performative democracy, not an actual democracy. So the people of the United States should have the right to choose their own president. The left disagrees.
So it's conceivable that this spreads through the entire country and you're talking about a very short window.
Like, what is the window?
The window is this has to be resolved before the ballots are printed or set up for the computer for the primaries.
Latest would be the end of the year.
I would think you'd have to. I mean, maybe they could go into January. First
primary is when.
If Iowa's in it, you would have to have it, resolved before the ballots are printed. But the other ones are in February and March. I mean, I think between now and the end of the year, this is our life.